All right, so we're going to talk about balancing chemical equations, and I'm going to do one from the notes. In the notes, you should have already looked at these. They're up on Google Classroom, along with the PowerPoint. You have your first 2 pages. I also put my answers to the first 2 pages up on Google Classroom, so you have that too. I'm going to do number 2 in the middle of the page because it's a really good example. From the notes, you should know that when you balance chemical equations, you only ever add coefficients. You never, ever add a subscript, okay? Now, that's when you're just balancing chemical equations. We'll talk later about when you're writing your own equations. That's a different story. But anyway, so when you're balancing chemical equations, the first thing you need to do is you need to look and see if you have the same number of each element on both sides. If you look through the notes, that's the gist of balancing chemical equations. You have to make sure you have the same number of C's over here as you have over here. You have the same number of H's over here as you have over here. Same number of O's over here as you have over here, okay? So you're gonna fix that by adding in those coefficients. So let's take a look. You have 2 C's over here, you only have 1 C here. You have 2 H's here, you have 2 H's here, so that's okay. You have 2 O's here, but look over here, you have 2 and 1. So you have 3 O's over here. When you have an addition sign between the 2 O's, you have to add them. So this superscript tells us we have 2. This superscript tells us we have 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. That's a problem because it's an odd number. The only way you're ever going to get something to multiply to an odd number, for the most part, especially a prime number like 3, is by using a fraction. So you don't want to get into that. So you want to make sure you make everything even as much as you can, okay? Now, your first instinct is probably going to be to put a 2 here because you're going to want to fix your C's. Because if you read through the notes, I tell you, leave O to last, leave H to last, do C first. That's great. The only thing is it doesn't fix our problem. It fixes our C problem because now we have 2 C's here and 2 C's here. But it doesn't do anything with our O problem because we have 4 plus 1, 5. Still an odd number. Again, another prime number. So you're not multiplying to that number very easily unless you're using a fraction. So, which you don't want to do again. I'm going to say that one more time. You don't want to use a fraction. You always want to use a whole number here. Okay? So, instead of doing this, let's look at our O's. We don't normally do that. We normally leave the O's and H's until last. But when you have an odd number like this, it's a good idea to get them out of the way. What's the best way to get rid of an odd number? Multiply it by 2. Or another even number. You could do that too. But start with 2. You always want to start with the lowest possible option. So let's put a 2 here. So now we have 2 O's here plus 2, which is 4. And we could easily get this O to a 4 because we could just put a 2 in front of it. But we screwed something up in the process. Now we have 4 H's here, okay? So what we have to do is we have to come over here and we have to put a 2 here in order to balance out our H's. So now we have 2 times 2, which is 4 H's. We also screwed up our C's, which our C's were already screwed up anyway, but we changed them again. So 2 times 2 is 4. So we got to put a 4 here to make our C's okay. So 2 times 2 is 4, so there's 4 C's. 4 times 1 is 4, there's 4 C's. We're good. 2 times 2 is 4 H's. 2 times 2 is 4 H's. Yay. Now, let's look at our O's. 4 times 2 is 8, not 6. It's 8. 4 times 2 is 8. Plus 2 times 1 is 2. 8 plus 2 is 10. So we have 10 O's over here. How are we going to get our 2 O's over here to 10? We're going to put a 5 in front of our O, or our O2. So we end up with 2C2H2 plus 5O2 yields 4CO2 plus 2H2O. And now everything is balanced because we have 4 C's, 4 C's, 4 H's, 4 H's, 10 O's, 8 plus 2 is 10 O's. Okay. Again, You never, ever, ever want to add a subscript. You have to add a coefficient. These are what you're adding. You're not going to add a subscript. So don't let me see you do this. You can't do that. Okay? You got to put a 4 there. Okay? So, the other thing I want to caution you on is if you decided instead of using this 2, you used a 4. So let's say you come up with this. That is still balanced because you have 8 C's, 8 C's, 8 H's, 8 H's. You have 16 plus 4, which is 20 O's, and you have 20 O's. It's still balanced, but watch. You have a 4, you have a 10, you have an 8, and you have a 4. You can take a 2 out of all of those. Take a 2 out of a 4, you get a 2. You take a 2 out of a 10, you get a 5. You take a 2 out of an 8, you get a 4. You take a 2 out of a 4, you get a 2. This is the right answer because it's the lowest whole number you could use. You don't want to do this. This is wrong because you could reduce. Okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to go through the notes, make sure you have everything. Do the balancing chemical equations. Come back over here. Do this sheet right here. I gave you the answers. I put them up on Google Classroom too. And I also want you to do this one. I'm going to show you in the next video how to do these. Because what you do is you have to actually write your own equations. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I want you to try this, see what you can do. The only assignment for this week is the quiz on balancing chemical equations. So you can practice it. The thing about chemical equations, balancing chemical equations, you need to remember is that it's a process. It's a puzzle. You have to work at it. You can't just say, I don't know how to do this and move on. You have to work the numbers. You have to keep trying different combinations until you get it the way you want it. If you get to a point where you're starting to get frustrated, you need to find yourself an online chemical equation balancer. They're all over the place. All you have to do is Google it. Put this, so you would take this and you would put it in. On the chemical equation balancer, you would put in C2H2 plus O2 yields CO2 plus H2O. It will balance it for you. And then you can work backwards. Now, obviously, you could just not learn this and go ahead and balance all your equations online, but that's only hurting you. So please don't do that. So that's what I want you to do for this week. Again, I'm going to put up another video in just a second about how you write your own equations from words. We have to deal with diatomic molecules, so we'll get there. So give this a shot. Send me a reminder with any questions.